Remedy Entertainment is no strangers to mind-bending places and scenarios across a multitude of different titles varying from Alan Wake all the way to Max Payne. But out of all of these series that they've worked on now, for me, none quite capture the magic of Control. In the first game, you play as Jessie Farden, a recently chosen director of the Federal Bureau of Control, or FBC, who finds herself trapped inside a fever dream of sorts where she must traverse through the headquarters of the clandestine US government agency, which is looking into top secret altered world events, or AWEs, which are classified as paranormal events that can affect time, space, and consciousness itself. The headquarters, known as the Oldest House, is a brutalist-style skyscraper in the center of New York City that can only be found by those that are meant to find it, otherwise being hidden by some unknown force or alternate dimension that is completely unexplainable. When you first make your way inside, you are met with an empty and ominous reception area, which is characterized by large and foreboding walls, stripped of any color and flavor, along with a whole host of government paraphernalia. But as you make your way deeper inside this now abandoned building, it becomes clear that things are about to get absolutely insane. What should just be one building in New York City somehow defies space itself, with corridors that go on for miles and an ever-changing and twisting labyrinth that one moment will throw you into an ordinary room and the next an otherworldly tapestry. Somehow, beyond reason, the inside of this structure is larger than the outside, going against the laws of physics itself. And all throughout your travels inside, you start to encounter what are known as the Hiss, a paranatural interdimensional resonance that is as aggressive as it is vitriolic, destroying most of the life inside the walls of this top secret government facility and using many human bodies as hosts to spread its infection and influence. Those possessed by the Hiss signal endlessly repeat a strange incantation, a poem of ambiguous origins and meaning, but one that is clearly ominous in nature. And the deeper you crawl inside this fortress of sorts, the stranger and stranger it gets. Because you see, the Oldest House is a place of power. It holds a paranatural connection to alternate dimensions, and comes into direct contact with the astral plane, another dimension in existence where a strange host of characters known as the Board sit and instruct you during your playtime. The walls around you will twist and contort with every step you take, and in certain moments you will be thrust into different locations entirely, like a small and barren motel with a constantly ringing telephone and anxiety-inducing sounds all around you. Most famously of all though, there's one room in this space, known as the Astral Maze, which once entered will spring into action, flipping ceilings onto the floor and floors onto the ceiling, and literally changing the makeup of the building before your very eyes, forcing you into rooms with hundreds of doors, no way out, and no hope. Almost like being trapped within a maze in your own mind. Or in other words, the Oldest House is less of a building and more of a character of its own, a creature that has a heartbeat and a lust for torture and confusion, that lets you rip apart its very skin to demolish enemies with, and is home to countless secrets and mysteries everywhere. And when you combine this with Soviet-era style aesthetics and themes of secretive government organizations with strict adherence to protocol and a noticeable delineation of responsibilities, making it so no one person quite knows exactly what is going on, this entire place gives off a relentlessly eerie feeling that is unshakable. So the question then becomes, what exactly is the Oldest House? We know that for 50 years after its initial completion, the FBC did operate out of it as their main headquarters, and that extensive research was done into countless AWEs, which we can find notes about scattered in the abandoned work and research rooms. At its peak, the facility likely would have been home to hundreds of employees as well, potentially being one of the highest funded government programs in history and diving into research in fields that were being created by the day, projects that might have been the most important in human history. And we also know that the Hiss attacked the Oldest House at some point after being let free, and consumed the essence of the project entirely. But this still leaves so much room for speculation and conjecture as to what is really going on here. For instance, could it be that the Oldest House is some sort of analogy to Yggdrasil, an ancient tree in Norse mythology that bridges the 9 worlds by its roots and branches? After all, at one point in Control, we meet a man named Adi who asks us to follow him to the Foundation, a series of infinite pillars that the Oldest House is built on, with a mention of doorways that can be used to travel to new worlds. Maybe the Oldest House is the center of the universe, a single point in time and space which forms all dimensions and reality into one, where doors lead not into other rooms, but new forms of existence itself. And if so, is there a more grand mind or creator behind all of this? Or how did this place of power that is so central central to the story of not only Control, but the now entire Remedy-connected universe come to be. Well, considering that Control 2 is currently in development, we may just get the answers to some of these questions that we're looking for. But due to the truly mysterious nature of what happens inside the walls of this skyscraper traveling through time and space, there will always be more questions than answers as to what's really going on here. And in a way, that's part of what makes The Oldest House, and Control by extension, one of the most fascinating universes and worlds to get lost in, where behind every corner, every door, and each elevator could be a portal into a new type of existence entirely. In a lot of ways, it feels like mystery and horror are a match made in heaven. Oftentimes, games with super mysterious themes happen to be scary, and almost always with anything that includes fear or panic, there are bound to be countless theories about the true nature of it all. And in terms of games that execute on this formula well, no one has done it better than Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and its infamous location, Ocean House Hotel. Back during the dusk of the 1950s in the Masquerade Bloodlines universe, a grand opening to a new mansion known as the Ocean House Hotel was about to take place. And due to all the excitement, a man named Ed and his loving family booked an extended vacation in order to be some of the first people who got to stay at this illustrious and decadent palace. However, what was supposed to be a fun family romp would turn into one of the most disturbing and mind-bending vacations of a lifetime. Near the beginning of the trip, Ed's wife began to notice him acting strange, garnering a special fascination with her locket, which she had recently obtained from her mother. And day after day, Ed only started to act more unusual. He became extremely distant to his wife and kids, barely speaking or acknowledging their presence, and on the final day of the trip, Ed suddenly vanished. In a fit of hysteria, Ed's wife began to cry and plead, and while she did, their son, Ed Jr., began scouring all over their new hotel for his father. But after hours of searching to no avail, Jr. finally decided to search the locked basement, which was home to all sorts of creepy symbols and figurines, along with patches of darkness that seemed to reach into the hells themselves. And almost as soon as Junior entered the basement, he too disappeared without a trace. Now even more distraught, Ed's wife instructed their daughter, Tiffany, to look for Junior. But before she could meet the same fate, a knock at the door came, and when they opened it, they found Ed, covered in blood and gore, with a sadistic look locked across his bruised face. The screaming and shouting lasted for but a moment, and in Ed's wake, all that was left was a deserted hotel with horrors beneath its floorboards. When we arrive at the hotel as a player character in game, it has now become utterly haunted, enveloped by the presence of evil spirits and ghosts that can send a shiver down the spine of even the most ruthless killers of the night, vampires, which we play as in game. And only by uncovering diary entries and old newspaper articles can we slowly unravel the mystery of what happened to this poor family, who was butchered by the father they trusted and the man they loved. In the laundry room, for example, in one of the machines can be found Junior's decapitated head, displayed as a trophy of sorts for those that wander close, and simply laid out in the hallway for all to see, a chopped up and minced torso of an innocent girl, Tiffany. At the time, Ed believed that his wife had gotten the locket from another man she was cheating with, but he was mistaken, as it was from her adoring mother who wept in their absence. But for as wild as the tale is, the story of the Ocean House Hotel doesn't stop there, because there are multiple reports of other strange things happening at this location. Rumors that the ground upon which it was built is cursed, and of course, the questions of how an otherwise normal man was driven to such insanity once he was in the confines of the hotel's walls. Certainly, there is more going on here than just a disgruntled marriage, as is made clear by simply stalking the halls of this place at night, where strange noises can be heard in rooms that were empty before, shadows appear that make no sense, or lamps that turn off and on as ominous voices whisper in our ear. And when you combine that with the labyrinthine layout that almost seems purposely built to confuse and bewilder those that stay, it's no wonder this level is so infamous for how creepy it really makes you feel. Behind every dark corner or in every room is a story that comes to life through nothing more than the way it makes you feel. There's almost no other place in a game with quite the same atmosphere that immediately is striking and terrifying, especially the more you dig into the location's past about a man that tortured his own family and other secrets which we never get to fully learn about. Without a doubt, Ocean House Hotel is not only one of the most mysterious and creepy places in gaming history, but also just one of the best, full stop, made up of breathtaking atmosphere, environmental storytelling, and a keen attention to detail that really makes the environment shine, even all these years later. The world of Disco Elysium is one that is steeped in political themes and philosophical strife, full of quests and scenarios that will make you think deeply about the human condition. And while for me, I vastly prefer experiences like Citizen Sleeper and its takeaways to those in Disco Elysium, if there's one thing about the game that I can never get off my mind, it's the bunker. You see, near the coastline in the western portion of Revishol's exterior, the city the game takes place in, you can find a peculiar abandoned bunker sitting with no one in sight. On first glance, this isn't very notable. After all, Revishol has a storied and bloodied past, with many bunkers dotting the landscape, most of which we get to explore and unearth secrets in. But this particular bunker is different. It has a door with one of the hardest skill checks in the game, almost impossible even, but even more crazy, if you do somehow succeed or hit a critical success with the roll of the dice, you still, despite defying all odds, are not allowed in. Presumably, the bunker is connected to the Grand Sea Fortress and was used as an inlet to the water canal, maybe for transporting supplies across the mainway in times of battle and war. But also, around the area can be heard strange noises and humming, along with a buzzing that illuminates itself in such a way to imply that something more sinister is going on. So what exactly is happening inside this inaccessible area? After all, nearby in the church, we can go on an extensive questline that sees us coming into contact with the paranormal and human beings that climb on walls like something out of a horror movie. So maybe they could all be connected. But the greatest part about this mystery is just that we don't know. Truly anything could lie inside this bunker, but considering where it is on the map and the strange circumstances that surround its past as well as its present, there's probably a lot more than meets the eye. And out of everything in Disco Elysium I want to know more about, this one takes the cake. Sadly though, in-game it serves as nothing more than a starting point for a thought known as One More Door, which if you contemplate on for over 45 minutes using your character upgrade screen, you will be met with this text. There's no way to open the supply depot door. Accept it. You cannot open all the doors. You have to integrate this into your character. Some doors will forever remain closed, even if every single other door will open at one time or another. Maybe to a key, or maybe to some sort of tool meant for opening doors. But this one will never accede to such commands. A realization crucial to personal growth. Crucial. While it's taken me some time to finally come around to it, the lore and world of the Dragon Age series is some of the best out there, and might just be my favorite fantasy universe of all time, especially after playing Dragon Age Origins for the first time recently. And one of the reasons for this is that the Dragon Age universe is absolutely filled to the brim with awe-inspiring mysteries and unanswered questions that make you just sit down and read hours of entries in the wiki about its creation. Things like the Fade and Black City, the ancient elven ruins of Arlathon, or unexplored yet significant places like Parvolin to the north, or whatever lies across the Amaranthine Ocean. But in a sea of such rich places full of interesting questions, maybe none pose more of a grand mystery than the one sitting right below us the entire time, the Deep Roads. Thousands of years ago, the dwarves of Dragon Age, situated in Thedas, began construction on a massive network of superhighways and roads that connected many large and smaller settlements alike deep underground called taigs. These taigs were home to sprawling dwarven riches, places to sleep, and houses of parliament that all facilitated a colossal trading empire that saw the dwarves rise to their golden age by connecting with the Tevinter Imperium and ancient elven societies. But as with all great things, the empire had to eventually come to an end, and in the case of the dwarves, this was due to the initial rise of the Darkspawn, hidden deep beneath Thedas' crust, which they sprang from into the Deep Roads, attacking and killing anything everything they saw. This eventually, after years of battle, resulted in almost all of the Taigs succumbing to death at the hands of the Darkspawn, while others were put under full lockdown, blocking off nearby deep road passageways so that no one could get in or out. Because while there was turmoil above ground in Thedas for all of this time, nothing would compare to the catastrophic fall of the dwarves, where what previously had been an underground civilization that spanned even more than the entire known space of the Dragon Age games became nothing more than a couple remaining Taigs hidden deep underground. And due to this fall, in recent history, there's been a handful of what are called blights, where the Darkspawn, now hidden in the lost parts of the deep roads and even further underground, discover dormant old god dragons that, when awoken, lead the fearsome hordes above ground to try and take over all of Thedas. Or in other words, over the past couple thousands of years, the deep roads have become one of the most horrific and tragic stories in all of Dragon Age. What before was a grand empire of epic proportions now lies in ruins, with devilish creatures even outside of the Darkspawn themselves calling it home, and countless secrets lost to the passage of time. For example, we at multiple points during the games come into contact with or hear about what are called broodmothers, which are dreadful and horrendous globs of human flesh and appendages with tentacles leaking from every orifice, who are crafted after kidnapping helpless women who are tortured and condensed into birthing machines of pure death and decay. And this is just one instance of how dark, disgusting, yet strangely fascinating the lore and the deep roads can get, full of secrets as to what even lurks in the shadows of the ancient ruins at this planet's core. And speaking of secrets, it's these questions that the Deep Road poses and the mysteries it alludes to that make it by far the most interesting part of Dragon Age, in my opinion, a series that already is full of amazing things to talk about. Because you see, the fall of the great dwarven empires didn't just mean the fall of the dwarves, it also meant the loss of so many tombs of information and history that otherwise would give us a much needed background on the lore of the series. In the Dragon Age Inquisition Descent DLC, for example, we discover that even deeper below the deep roads, there are entire civilizations of beings that don never before seen armors, and massive creatures known as titans that could literally be the key to decade-long secrets like who the old gods are and what the fabled ancient Evanurus elven pantheon was up to so many years ago. Could it be that the titans themselves once held the power to fight against the ancient elves, maybe even being the actual forgotten or forbidden ones that the Evanurus were said to have been at war with? Regardless, it's mysteries like this that make the deep roads so interesting, and even just the idea of such a metropolis being built underground is fascinating in its own right. It makes you wonder about what the height of the dwarves would have really been like, what secrets they were hiding beneath the ground from everyone else, and also questions of where things like lyrium, found underground and mined by dwarves who are resistant, even originally stem from. And for me, it's without a doubt one of the most mysterious places in any game series I've ever seen. So much so that even titles like Dragon Age Origins, where they have extensive slogs through the deep roads with boring fights and mundane color tones, the lore and curiosities on offer are so exciting that they still become some of my favorite moments. If you haven't played Dragon Age yet or don't understand why it has such a diehard fanbase, look into even just surface level lore and knowledge on the deep roads and you will instantly understand exactly what it is that makes this series so special. First impressions for me are everything, and it's because of this I've struggled for years to try and get into Pillars of Eternity. I always thought the start of the first game was so slow and mundane, and because of that, mixed with combat that I absolutely loathe, I never was able to see the appeal. But luckily, after finally forcing myself to give the title another shot after multiple failed attempts, and going in with the mindset of taking the experience slow to enjoy, I finally have fallen in love. And the thing that actually made me come to adore the title and its sequel are the amazing quests with absolutely riveting and engaging stories that open up a whole host of unforgettable mysteries and questions. However, while the main quests, DLCs, and multiple side quests are full of fascinating places to dive into and analyze, maybe the most mysterious of all are the Endless Pass of Od Nua. Located directly below the castle of Caed Nua, which we assume control of early on in the first game, the Endless Pass are a 15-level mega dungeon consisting of labyrinthian sets of tunnel networks, caverns, and secret passageways, all hidden beneath the Earth's crust, shrouding some of the biggest secrets in the entire series and becoming the home to countless creatures and beings alike. You see, many millennia ago, there was a hyper-advanced civilization of warriors and scientists known as the Inguithans. They controlled much of the known world that we play on in the Pillars games, but maybe their biggest achievement came from their mastery over the souls of the universe. In Pillars, every time someone or something dies, their soul is sent either to the in-between, disintegrated, or thrust into the wheel. This wheel is constantly spinning, contorting souls into new bodies of which they inhabit and live on, sometimes, like in the case of our protagonist the Watcher, even being awakened, meaning they are able to remember their past selves. So with mastery over this cycle of life, the Inguithans built massive contraptions to harness and use souls. But in the case of the Endless Paths, this process resulted in mass genocide and some of the craziest things imaginable. The king of Caed Nua at the time of the Inguithans was known as Ad Nua. He was a respectable and lovable king, but when his son died trying to honor him in battle, he dedicated his life to trying to get him back. He commissioned the smartest scientists and animancers to try and gain control over the wheel of time itself in order to bring his son back. But after years of trial and error, he finally had to start turning to soul sacrifice in order to achieve his goals. Deep beneath the keep of Caed Nua were massive Audra veins that pulled essence from the core of the world itself, and by sacrificing thousands of his own people, he was able to further study the methods to bring his only son back. Eventually, this led to uprisings and riots from his people, as thousands were cut down by inhuman Audra vessels that murdered on the command of this now evil tyrant Ad Nua. And well, this eventually led to the downfall of this entire group of Inguithans, where now deep underground only a couple survivors remain, retaining their life by killing one another and converting their souls into essence. So in the time of the first Pillars game, when we actually assume control of Caed Nua as the Watcher, we get a set of side quests to try and discover who the so-called master is below, the king of the Endless Paths. It's one of the coolest side quests and dungeons I've ever seen in a game, with each of the 15 levels you must traverse down being home to untold secrets, journal entries, and a deeper understanding of Inguithan society and cultures that for many is nothing but rumors and fables. And to top it all off, the further you go underground, the more strange creatures, both feral and sentient alike, you discover, all with their own societies and customs that have been formed so far away from polite civilization, along with crazy revelations they can help you uncover. You can find dens full of spiders that feast on the minds of their prey, ogres that are hiding from their past, ancient bug-like creatures that are cunning, or even massive dragons with the power to take on the gods themselves. And as if it couldn't get any more interesting, the things you uncover here about the Inguithans and their society, about the history of this planet, tie in directly to the main story as well, and provide more context for some of the things you uncover later at the very end of the main story, and even some of the main plot of the second game as well. Or in other words, the Endless Paths are an utterly captivating place within the Pillars of Eternity universe. A mega dungeon that will take hours and hours to finally beat, full of puzzles, riddles, and monsters that all peel the layers back as to what actually went on in these great walls so many years ago. And it makes you start to wonder more and more about how these paths were even formed, and what the ancient peoples of the time must have gone through to construct everything you find. Or even, what else is out there in the cavernous wastes of the underground in the Pillars of Eternity universe, home to so much lost technology and Audra veins that can be used to power some of the greatest achievements civilization has ever known. And despite all that we do learn about the Endless Paths of Ad Nua, there is still so much we don't know too. So many passageways we cannot go through, so many gaping maws that lead to something greater, and the constant feeling that we are being watched by something greater than ourselves, almost like a sign from the universe itself. And considering the main themes of this series and the existence of God and the meaning behind it all, it fits in perfectly. I'm such a sucker for ancient long-lost civilization stories and uncovering the past almost like an archaeologist, where you are always left with more questions and answers. And in terms of places like this, the Pillars universe, and especially the Endless Paths, are about as good as it gets. For any of you who have watched my channel for a while now, you know that outside of Subnautica, I'm not a huge fan of survival games. I find most of them boring and tedious without friends, and oftentimes I hit a point where I begin to question why I'm even spending my time playing. But if there's one thing that can make me forget about all the tedium of collecting wood and building makeshift shacks, it's a grand mystery that is so fascinating you can't help but dig into it further. And in terms of survival games with something like this, potentially none are more jaw-dropping than the big reveal from The Forest, which starts out like any other unassuming survival game, but slowly unravels into pure psychological horror and the discovery of one of the most mysterious places in games. After crash landing mid-plane flight in a remote peninsula off the coast of Canada and watching your son be kidnapped from a man covered in what looks like blood, it becomes your sole goal to not only survive, but get your son back. And after spending a couple of nights in this haunted wilderness, it becomes apparent that while you're the only person you know of who survived the plane crash, you certainly are not even close to the only person here. In the dead of night, you will be hunted down by strange tribesmen and feral humans which grunt and scream at you, attacking your housing as they slowly become more and more confident in getting closer for full-on engagements. It creates a very unnerving sense of tension the entire time you play, and makes searching for what happened to your son that much more agonizing. But the true genius of The Forest isn't just the tense world building, but rather the insane place it eventually leads you to. Because in your adventure to find your son, you start to slowly peel back some of the history of this demented peninsula, discovering that many years ago a group of Christian mercenaries came to found new colonies, but after making landfall discovered that there was a lot more than meets the eye. Powerful devices known as resurrection obelisks were uncovered which would grant the missionaries astounding otherworldly gifts or riches in return for child sacrifice. And because of this, they slowly transformed into fanatics and sadistic killers in order to get their way and maintain power. The obelisk would transform the now dead children into horrible monstrosities which looked like a stomach-turning mush of human matter with faces that screamed and begged for help, hobbling around on multiple legs. Eventually, this led to stories of this supposedly haunted place, which attracted many adventurers who went missing, especially those with children. And all of this commotion eventually led to a highly funded team known as the Sahara Therapeutics Research Group founding a foothold in the region, after which they gained complete control of the obelisk and other top-secret artifacts, of which massive facilities were built around to study their properties. One of the main scientists at the time had a daughter who was dying, and in order to try and save her, the teams would sacrifice dozens or potentially even hundreds of children in the device in order to study what would happen, with many early test subjects becoming Cthulhian-like monsters which would become angry and fight back, while other children would become very sick with violent seizures. But after running out of their initial batch of children captive lab rats, the team decided to use another Ancient Ones artifact found which could be fired as a pulse weapon, which took down the plane you were riding at the start of the game, and the reason your son was kidnapped was for the use in the experiments. So towards the end of the game, you eventually find your son dead and the main researcher's daughter alive, now transforming into a massive meat zombie, after which the main protagonist decides his only way to save his son is to once again down another plane for more children experimentation. It's a horribly tragic story, and one that only gets more crazy in the sequel, where we can discover an Ancient One's golden cube which can travel between dimensions and create wormholes. But really, at the core of all of this is the Sahara Research Labs. These pristine yet harrowing research facilities spread across the island are in stark contrast to the rugged wilderness outside, and often are built around large alien buildings or artifacts that are being studied. Even walking through the red and white hallways of these massive research stations is daunting, and imply that there must have been countless scientists here doing some of the most heinous things imaginable. And really, it just opens up countless mysteries as to how this amount of horror could ever happen. After all, we know in our real lives that things like Unit 731 from Japan show that this can actually happen, but the Ancient One's obelisk at the center of it all also call into question what these things even are. Who exactly were the Ancient Ones who left behind so many things on this peninsula, presumably thousands of years ago? What did the Christian mercenaries first see in their visions when they arrived at the island that caused them to turn like they did? And what even is the purpose of the child sacrifices in this place that create beings that look straight out of a nightmare? While we do get a lot of answers and discoveries across multiple games now, we still have so many things to uncover about what happened inside the walls of Sahara Therapeutics Research Group, as well as how all of this alien tech works, what its purpose is, and where it comes from. Some in the community have even speculated that it could be a top secret government cover-up with the end goal of multi-dimensional space travel. Regardless though, the research being done behind the walls of Sahara Therapeutics in this remote forest is some of the most mysterious out there, and it makes the forest a game with countless places that send a shiver down your spine while being so captivating you can never look away.